Chris.
Hi.
Welcome, everyone. We're gonna first of all talk a little about our container offering, Exquisite Embodiment for Gene Keys and Somatic Energetic Mastery Facilitation Training. And so this is a container for 6 people to join us to practice weekly a number of skills that really help you come to a lucid recognition of space holding, of energy as it moves, and how to take our gene keys deeply into our body, as well as demonstrate that for those that are wanting to come on that journey with us. So we'll talk a bit about ourselves. We'll even end with a demo and an experience that people can try at home. So first, I feel like I need you to introduce yourself for anybody that is new to Chris Dierkes. Dierkes. How do you say your last name?
I say it Dierkes. There's even argument within my own family. So
Excellent.
don't worry about getting it wrong or right, depending on who you ask in my own family. So I'm Chris, and my background is that I was originally trained to be a pastor, a priest in the Christian lineage. So I was a monk, or had religious vows anyway. Monastic vows, and lived a community life in my early 20s, and was a very intense spiritual seeker years, and kind of lost my soul in the process. It was so spiritual that I didn't really know who I was in the midst of these senses of connection to the vastness and the oneness and the unity of all life, which was profound and really blessing and graceful, but I didn't know who I was in the midst of that. So that initiated a long period of transformation that was about reconnecting or retrieving lost aspects, what I had become so obsessively focused on spiritual awakening, the loss of understanding the nature of emotions and the human nervous system, as well as the nature of unique blueprinting and energy. And so that led for the whole long process of the study and the reintegration of those dimensions of being, and the gene keys became one of a really powerful modes in that exploration, and then have been practicing it myself and working with others and reading and sharing and facilitating now for years, and really excited for what we have on offer here.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Shepard. If anybody's new to me, my background is I was a body worker, massage therapist, osteopathic practitioner. Primarily, my training was in myofascial and craniosacral release, and I did that over the course of a 20 plus year career. I started really young, and it was yeah, it was an amazing phase of my life because I love the body so much and I love working with helping people. And I always felt like there's this part missing, which was the soul side of it. I'm like, I really consistently saw people showing up with these elements of pain or discomfort in their body that felt to me like there was more going on than just the alignment and their posture and what injury that they'd had. And through that was more drawn into starting to discover elements of shamanic lineages as well as the gene keys and some parts of the human design system, which I needed to understand a little bit of, but then moved quite easily more into the gene keys because it went well with this other side of my practice, which was teaching yoga, facilitating yoga retreats. I did for about 12 years, run a retreat center where I got to work with practitioners from all over the world. And in that time, I was working to help them facilitate events. I wasn't leading as many of the events. I was just in the beginning of my career around trying to figure that out and also running a massage therapy practice. And so what I got to see was the way people do group facilitation well and who really rocks that energy when they're able to stay in the seat of themselves, and that alpha calm, self-commanding nature allows people's nervous systems to lean in and connect to that. And it allows people's systems to really be in receivership of the transmission of the knowledge and remember for themselves and restore for themselves that all the answers are already here. It's really just sometimes that we've gotten a little bit off track. And so I'm really excited to help to deliver that same teaching I've had over the course of my career to other facilitators, in particular, people that are wanting to deepen in their facilitator embodiment or try something new, or gene keys practitioners that are coaches or guides that are wanting to now like look at other ways that they can support people in the practice of feeling it through their body and feeling it through these different heart fields. And yeah, we've got 6 weeks of opportunities of learning that will demonstrate a little bit of that today. Let's talk a little bit about the content and then we'll get into a bit of a demonstration. And you and I were riffing on this just a little bit before. And of course, there's a website where people can check it out in more detail. But I loved what you were sharing about the space holding piece. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So, I mean, one way I think of looking at the process, say in this case with the gene keys, is first learning. There's a lot to learn. All what are all these numbers and what are these lines and if you get into a chart, what are the spheres and the colors and how do they connect to each other? And there can be a period of kind of mentalizing. And then at some point, ideally, what kicks in is the realization that what we're doing in this work is having a map to open up aspects of life, the codes of life, and especially of the soul's journey. And that opens up the art of contemplation. And that's maybe first on a more individual basis. And then if someone's moving into a more guide position, whether it's working one-on-one or whether it's working with small groups, large groups, dyads, whatever, there's another step up. There's a new set of skills that are being called for in terms of now sitting in a position as witness or guide or reading the map and in relationship of listening to the depth of a person's being and letting the map speak and their experience speak to the map and the map speak to their experience. And so that next kind of set of qualities or capacities really need to be energetically congruent to the nature of this whole process, which is rooted in the deep history of Taoism. And that there's a classic notion of Taoism being like water, being willing to flow, not being resistant. The water finds its way through the rocks by going around them or under them and becoming this kind of gentle, powerful, persuasive presence in life. And so we've designed this offering in the idea of how do we become energetically congruent when leading this work, because it doesn't work if you can know all the numbers and everybody can know all the concepts and be able to, spit them out and memorize them and have all kinds of great technical know-how is great. But if it isn't really in the spirit and in the ethos and in the stream of this transmission, there's going to be an inherent mismatch. There's going to be an inherent incongruence. So what we're really focused on is a lot of beingness side of the equation in terms of facilitation. How to hold a space of really deep stillness and evoke a space of really deep stillness for others to settle into. How that stillness can be warm versus feeling kind of more clinical. How it can be a kind of warm space of witnessing, to be beheld, to feel held, to be able as a practitioner or facilitator to really hold space, like not just say the word gets thrown around a lot, but what it actually means in actual practice, so that then there is a field that's co-generated, it's invoked, that then allows others to themselves start to resonate to this different frequency, which is profoundly countercultural, as you were saying, not rooted in a what's broken and how do we fix it and any of that stuff, but starting with a fundamental state of equanimity, of peace, of grace, and then figuring out our lives and what might need some healing or what might need some letting go or what might need some stepping into with courage or, appreciation from the space where we already feel this deep sense of what I call kind of the solution space. And really starting there and walking by that way and ending in the same place. Um, and then through that, watching what the magic and the mystery that happens when there's a field that's really deeply nourishing and nurturing. And when there's really deep seeing of another human being and really deep listening and letting them be, and a really deep green light for their being to unfold itself and unwind into their own coherence.
Yeah, this can show up in our world where we maybe come to the gene keys because we're looking for solutions to our suffering. And so it's like, I just need to figure out this map so that I can stop being in pain. And, you know, lucky for the rest of the world that I've figured out this map and now they've got me to teach them how to figure out their own map. And that does show up in really well-intentioned endeavors to appease pain or to create peace. And inevitably, what I've found in my own unwinding of my practitioner habits of assessment and moving towards alignment and just those some of those natures that can show up of like, let me be a good problem solver, let me be a good fixer, is this inadvertent communication of the way you are isn't perfect already. And so that yin disposition of being receptive to the intelligence that is right in front of us without needing to move to alter it in any way means that something bigger than my previous patterns can emerge. And I can actually be guided through the intelligence of what is energetically in front of me because I'm so attuned to my own apparatus. And that space is a very, very different way of guiding and leading these processes. And so we're really excited to be able to give people just a couple of hints of what that can feel like, as well as to deepen in your capacity to know where you're doing it in a really beautiful way already, as well as like to remember that there's these elements of the constellations of the energy and how they can be laid out and played with in a, you know, really like a sweet and fun way. We can sometimes take this stuff so seriously where it's just like, okay, they've hired me to do a reading and now I need to help them understand how to not suffer. And actually what's like we're going to be offering people is another way of really tuning the apparatus to be part of this dance of this orchestra of awakening that we all find ourselves collaborating in now. And so, yeah, I'm really looking forward to going more into that. We were going to talk a little bit about the Tao and some of the principles of Taoism, because I imagine anybody that's interested in this program maybe knows at least a little bit about yin and yang and the Taoism as a way of living. But it can be helpful to kind of bring us, anytime we do a teaching, it's like, let's come back to like our foundational tools and reflect on what does this mean in the embodiment part. I love what some of the parts that you were sharing. I'm going to go into that a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that if we look at the classic symbol of the yin and the yang, there's the larger white half of the circle, the yang, the larger black half of the circle, the yin. But then there's these fascinating two little bubbles. There's a little black circle inside of the white half, and there's a little white circle inside of the black half. And so the map actually has a fourfold orientation. More often people look at it and immediately just see two that are in a oneness, and that's part of it, but it's really actually a fourfold movement. And those two smaller circles are the ones that are usually left out of the equation, and they're quite potent. So this course will be focused quite a bit on the yin within the overall yang, the little black circle inside of the larger white half of the field. From the facilitator's point of view, you get to start to see the other half of the equation in terms of those who are, clients or people that are going through a process. And when we talk about the yin inside of the yang, yang is an energy that moves outward, yin is an energy that moves inward. So, from a facilitator point of view, there's still a primary dynamic of needing to be outward, needing to be in a leadership position. There's nothing, we've all had the experience of going to something and then whoever the person or persons who are supposed to be leading kind of don't have the room, don't have the energy, and then other people start to like try to take it over, and then other people get anxious and nervous and rustle papers or start to look at their watch or want to leave the room. So there is an external component for sure, in the sense that the facilitator or facilitators need to set the tone, they need to set the space, they need to set the parameters, they need to set the ethos in a way that's not domineering, obviously, but in a way that's actually encouraging and makes everybody, as you said earlier, go, oh, that's really nice. Now I can relax. This person's got a handle on it. They're getting to know it's good. Now I can relax into this and explore. And so there is a yang element of going outward and becoming directive and agentic in facilitation. But when we add the yin into it, the outwardness doesn't feel pokey. It doesn't feel like it's pressing an agenda. It doesn't feel like it's just gonna railroad everybody. Okay, we got these three things. We got 30 minutes, everybody. We got to get through this. We've all been in those meetings too, in those experiences or relationships or whatever, where it's people just feel like a number and they just feel like they're just a means to somebody else's end, or they just have to check boxes for some, checklist reason. And it doesn't feel like a humane experience any longer. But when we add the yin inside of the yang, what we get is it's still outward, but now it's not so linear. It adds the yin quality, which is circular. And then all of a sudden it goes outward, but it feels like it's spirally. And it creates an enveloping feeling, a feeling of really being held, a nice, really big bubble of protection and safety and slowed down experience, so that people can, as you were saying, Sarah, like get in touch with their unwinding, their body's natural rhythms, where we can temporarily put aside the challenges that'll still be there after a session or after a workshop. But to have a special sacred space where we can feel like there's really a container of really deep peace and really deep love. And then inside of that, each person is still responsible for their own process. And this allows the facilitator not to start to feel, as you were saying, it's their job to fix someone else or have all the answers, or get anxious about, like, what if they ask me a question? I don't know the answer and I have to look expert. It allows us to really relax and remember, like, what is the empowerment, what's the responsibility of this kind of conscious energetic facilitation is to ensure that the field is pristine, to feel that there's a field of coherence and that people feel that they matter. Their lives really matter, their questions matter, their emotions matter, their sensation matters, their relationships, their experiences, their doubts, their questions, their dreams, their intuitions matter, and that there's a safe space for them to come into their own knowing that's being held. And so we're really going to focus on that side of the equation. Very, in a really, like you said, joyful, playful, and yet also serious, get down to business kind of way.
Yeah, there's a section of time. I love just going through those elements and reviewing that part. And I was just reminiscing, and there's a section of time where my contemplation became like, just look at the hexagram and look at how the hexagram is compiled, and where are the yang lines, where are the yin lines, and how in their expression is that communicating the transmission to you without going into like, wait a second, what gene key is that, or what gate is that in the human design system. And I was amazed. Like, I was amazed at how it came alive for me and started to teach me these secrets that had not been taught to me through Richard's experience of it, through Ra's experience of it, or through any of the other teachers, including my mother and grandmother, who threw coins, who have been studying the I Ching since I was like a wee one and before. So like long before I was interested in it, my lineage was interested in it. And so then I started to, okay, right, we can go back to the I Ching and actually look up like what were the names of each of these oracle expressions of the hexagram before they became these systems that have shown us how they show up in our lives, as the Book of Changes showed us. Um, I want to touch on and just share with people a little bit too about our alchemy background and how we did a couple of years back teach a Gene Keys course that was specifically on alchemy, which is another way of saying it is contemplation. But it was really helpful in this program that we put together, which will weave into parts of this, is to be able to show people these elements of like, what is the nervous system in its response of protection, of provision, of evolution, and how is that showing up in an embodied experience? And then how is that needing to be met really before some of the elements of true contemplation or true alchemy can really start to take form as involution, as coming into us? And so that there is a process to the way our chemistry is influenced, the way our DNA starts to sing with the expression of the frequencies. And then if you just try to jump into the frequencies without taking, a true authentic stock of like, how is my container? How is my nervous system? In what way am I showing up to be the contemplative alchemist? And that when we follow at least a little bit of a structure around that is so much more successful in the way that we can come into more of the tantra of the experience. So the weaving of the dark and the light and the hot and the cold and the human experience in its awakening process, because we're just this journey of coming to our awakening. And so, yeah, that part of cracking the codes and sort of those elements of what we brought together and that are also going to be a part of it. So anybody that was in that program can join us. Anything jumping out that you want to share about emotional alchemy or sort of alchemy is?
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciated what you were sharing there. So we're focusing, as I said, a lot on, especially the beginning, but really throughout on the yang turned into this more mature yang of space holding, of warmth, of deep listening, of radical presence, and that how crucial that is to set the right tone and also to model for others that these are human capacities or latent possibilities of life that we all can step into as a parent, in a primary relationship with friends, with people we work with. Like, it can change life just to be able to actually be present and like actually give your attention to someone without trying to fix them, without trying to change them in a way that is respectful, that respects their autonomy. But you'll get feedback. People say like, wow, you were really listening. You actually cared about the questions you asked me actually showed that you cared. And I know that that seems like a low bar potentially. That's the old thing about like common sense isn't very common. So in the sense that just that people are always on their phones and the whatever, like to actually be deeply still and present and warm and open and in our own energy does wonders for ourselves, and it opens up wonderful space for others as well. And then as well, what happens is, like in terms of the work we did around alchemy, when there's that big bubble of safety and when there's space, And when there's really unconditionally nurturing and approving and accepting and deep empathy as kind of just the baseline, the drumbeat, people may start to feel it's still their choice, but they can feel safe to start going within. So they go more into a yin space. And then stuff will start getting stirred up in their being. And so we will also be covering this course as a facilitator, as a guide, as someone who's in the space holder place. What happens when somebody starts to go into their churn? What happens when the caterpillar's gone into the cocoon and they're melting down and turning into goo and their old way of thinking of how they should have been, of whatever it was, always caretaking other people's feelings. And then they've experienced the downsides of that process. And now they're trying to undo that. And before they don't just jump from not caretaking to all of a sudden having great boundaries and being able to articulate their own needs. There's a middle space, which is where the alchemy, really, really transpires in a deep way, where the old order has to melt away, but the new order isn't yet established. And it's a moment of courage, it's a moment of a lot of trust, and it's a moment that can't be done on behalf of anyone else, but in which we can support in a way that's empowering and honoring by even deepening the space holding at that moment and really feeling that so they actually feel that they're in the cocoon, and then it's a warm cocoon and they can figure out their way to go from being caterpillar to butterfly.
Yeah, truly. Learning that that is a process and that it has phases and they're pretty predictable and they always, have these expressions that are familiar in some way to your life. It makes it so much more easy. I'd love to do a little demonstration of a constellation of like an example so people can get a felt sense of this, which I would welcome. This will be something where if you're following along and you want to experience this for yourself, Chris is going to lead me through it, but I would say that you can do the same thing for yourself. And that would be my encouragement is like get a sense of this whilst you're watching this. So you can really start to embody the practice yourself and you'll get these awarenesses, these epiphanies that can come through. I'm always shocked when I get facilitated through these of like, I never felt it in that way before. Before I do, would you give like just a little mini lesson on what a constellation is according to you?
Yeah, they can go by constellation. Some people call it conscious space or live space. But really, its roots go all the way back to, um, oh, did it slow down? Oh, let's see. Is that better?
I'm still here.
Yeah, did it pause for a sec? Oh, is it okay?
Seems to be now.
Yeah, a little glitch. So, I mean, really, to me, it goes all the way back to if you were naming, oh,
Sorry, we cut out for a second. Chris, we were just talking about what a constellation is in your experience or according to you.
yeah, that whether you call them constellations or some people call them sort of conscious space process, but really to me it goes all the way back to as you were naming your training in deep animistic traditions. It's a long, long tradition of the world over where someone draws a circle on the ground and then sits inside of it, and that's the space of their. They might feel the circle represents symbolizes wholeness, it symbolizes a sense of their own agency and empowerment, alignment to the four directions of life. So this is a thing that humans have been doing for thousands and thousands and thousands of years in one way or another. But basically, the simple variation of it is that you use intention to clarify a space having a specific purpose, which, as we'll see in a moment, we're going to use for the shadow, the gift, and the essence or city frequency of a specific gene key. And so three spaces will be circumscribed or delineated for that exact function or purpose. In other words, once you've got those three spots set up and you can put like, if you're in your house and you want to put like three cushions or Some people put pieces of paper and write the names on each one so they remember what it is. We're going to set this up in a horizontal line going from left to right. So I'm on camera, left to right. um, from shadow to gift to city, then back to gift, then back to shadow. And in particular, we're going to watch how those first two circles are transformed the second time through as compared to the first. So once with our intention, we've established the spaces as having specific functions, then when a person steps into one of those circles, what they will experience is what they've set up that space to be. So if it's the shadow frequency of a specific gene key, that's what they'll experience. And you can always step in and step out. And what's nice is when you circumscribe, literally create a circle for a space, you can move into it and you can move out of it. You're not stuck in there. And it helps to first differentiate what can otherwise be all mushed together stuff and hard to get a handle on it. And then first differentiating, having each space have its own autonomy. But then by working in a circuit way that we're going to show, you get a sense of integration, of a reintegration. So usually a way of thinking of constellations is you get like kind of knotted geometry, then you untangle and unwind it. And then, as you said, tantra means weaving, then you weave it back together.
Yeah, I loved how you brought up too this place, which can be so helpful for people to remember in the learning, is that there's already a well-established field of humanity participating in this. And then that is something that you will be able to experience. Like you already know this, your body already knows this. So it's more in the unknowing and the getting into the right side of our brain that allows us to really recognize the transmission as an experience as opposed to a book or a map. And so yeah, should we pull a card or do like the gene key of expression like we did the other day?
I pulled a card. Do you want to do this one? Oh, it was 30, it is 34, which is Shadow of Force, Gift of Strength, and City of Majesty. Does that sound like a good one?
Yeah, lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna stand up and just shed a quick layer.
Yeah. And I'll say, while that's happening, that one of the reasons that this process works along the lines of what Sarah was sharing, is that these three, um, yeah, let me see your face. It's here. Um, is that these are three states or dimensions that are ever present in any moment. So once we've established with conscious intent and conscious attention these spaces and you step into them, you're giving yourself permission to tune into a part that's already active in our being. It may not be that our attention is always noticing it, but it's not coming from somewhere else. It's just actually attuning to these three core dimensions or layers of our experience that are ever present, but we're not always consciously attuning. So that's why this works. So Sarah's going to start in the shadow circle of force. And as she tunes in, she's going to listen to whatever it is, sensations, it can be emotion, it can be images that pop up into her mind, whatever it is. And then she's just going to share what she's noticing.
So feeling sort of a I guess almost like a stuck or heavy energy in my body, but I'm really visually, and this doesn't always happen to me, but this is the experience right now, seeing like an arrow with like things going around it, but it's like quite pointy forward. And that it's almost like the bow of a boat where there's elements of wrapping around it, but I don't feel like I feel separate from them. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, there's like me as the arrow, and then there's this weave going around me. And yeah, I feel pointed. Yeah. Yeah.
Pointed, and you also mentioned heavy,
Dense.
dense.
Yeah. Go gift.
So, yeah. So if it feels good, you move over to the center circle. And this is now the gift of number 34 is strength. So just taking a moment, just attuning to what it's like to be in this space.
So right away, the pointiness turns from pointing out to more being met in four directions. I was oriented to one direction, but now I can feel more of a direction of support at my back and also in the right and the left and the front.
Mm.
I'm still noticing sort of that bow of the boat, but I don't feel such a strong dissemination between like self and other. There's more of a like a collaborative group. Um, yeah, it almost looks like if you were at the top of the Eiffel Tower and you were looking down the Eiffel Tower, and there's like these energies coming together and moving upward, like that
Mm.
arrow forward turned like into a tower upward with a
Oh,
wide base.
nice.
Yeah.
Oh, wide base. Yeah. So in the earlier, I love that. Yeah, the convergence that you're naming. In the earlier circle, you named dense, and I'm curious about in this circle, has that stayed the same? Has that changed? Is that
There's, strength makes sense.
hmm.
There's like fortitude or fortified as opposed to dense. It feels supported and supportive,
Nice?
opposed to like stationary and like a minus or a minus.
Yeah. Yeah, you named that feeling of the space behind you came alive and the sense of your back, and, feeling the support. Yeah, lovely.
So excited to feel majesty.
Please go for it. So the city frequency, the essence layer here on 34 as majesty.
Oh,
Mm.
oh, there's just like this rightness of holding a vision. I feel like kind of like
Mm.
this experience of like if we were all to take turns like standing at the top of the Eiffel Tower, we'd be able to share with everybody else, here's what I see, and it's magnificent, and almost this like you gotta see this kind of experience. But really more so that it's real, it feels like a rightness for me to experience. It feels like a alignment from the higher elements for me to be able to see through my eyes this on behalf of those who can't.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's really beautiful. Why don't we just take a few minutes to let that, or moments anyway, to let that sink in.
Yeah. Let me let this imprint.
And if you're doing the home version of this game, playing at home, do note that you may have slightly distinct experiences, and that's great. And part of it, what we're really listening for and what we really develop our calibration and capacity in this process and in this course, we're going to focus on the very specifically a sort of competency or capacity for listening for the band of frequency. Not everybody's going to have the experience of the Eiffel Tower and standing at the top of the Eiffel Tower is their version of majesty. But that initial experience you had of like, oh, it's so sweet, and I wish everyone could feel this way and see this. Those kind of moments are the hallmarks, and those will be there. Those will be common. Those will be collective, and then there'll be all kinds of unique variation and diversity on that same basic theme.
I
Yeah.
feel lifted up. Like I feel like there's hands under my heart behind my back, and they just want to like lift me up. It's really, I have to kind of
Mm.
keep opening my eyes to almost come back to the space. So I'm going to take those with me.
So now, and this is where we're gonna do reversing the order. So Sarah's gonna come from the city back to the gift, whilst in a sense bringing the city energy now to the gift frequency.
And sometimes we'll include like the mudra would be a great like bringing the energetic mudra with you to take that imprint from that Siddhic understanding back down into the gift. But this can also just be this like with this new influence or this new understanding, how does that show up in the expression of the gift? And oh, this is new. I haven't experienced this before. Um, I don't feel the gift at all the same way now. I don't feel the tower. I feel so strong.
Mhm.
Not like strength, like I'm strong and powerful, but effortless strength, like that strength of the energy moving me, and I'm not creating any effort or any force. My body's not even doing this. I'm moved by the force,
Mhm.
but I don't feel above or below. I
Mhm.
I feel more just the experience of probably the closest thing I could describe it is sometimes in asana in yoga, it doesn't feel like I'm doing chaturanga or a pose or anything like that. It's like the energy starts to move my body and I feel light and powerful together.
Mhm. Light and powerful
Yeah.
and being moved. That's really insightful.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful, it's a beautiful, for some unexpected twist of strength, of a deeper, a truer kind of strength. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, this one is where it gets, it's already been very interesting, and this is going to get even more interesting in a way, or another form of interesting, which is can't really call this space the shadow anymore. This has been all brought into the light. But what do you notice here in this circle?
Weather, kind of the edge of a storm where
Mm,
there's this like electrical sort of thunderous energy, but there's also this beautiful sunshine shining through on the edge of it, which is just highlighting the beauty of the storm.
mm,
Brings so much more depth to the clouds and brings so much more awe to the like the power of the storm. Yeah. Yeah, it's like there's a little bit of mountainous energy, and then there's this big sort of wet electrical energy, and then there's this dawning golden light to the right side of it. And so, yeah, very different experience than the first expression of the shadow. And again, there's this awe of like, and I get to witness this, or I get to
mm.
be in experience with this. Yeah.
I love that the word power came out versus force. You know, it has this the power and the intensity of what you're naming, and also the awe and the witnessing and the sweetness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
I can really feel that. Thank you.
I'm gonna grab the chair.
Yeah.
To tell anybody about the listeners about we're coming up with a title. We'd love a title for this space between the the reintegrated shadow gift space. So I'll just let you
Mhm.
share on that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been playing with some provisional terms with nothing we haven't been open to hearing. We've one that we've played with is Lumen, which I like. And you had that light energy in that. And you said dawning is another one. So some way of playing where shadow goes into almost dawn or liminality kind of way that we've noticed that through this way of putting them in a horizontal line, not a vertical line. the horizontal spectrum of consciousness and energetic embodiment, and then moving through it in a kind of circuit way, it brings a more fundamental state of wholeness. Um, so if we were using some of the languaging, going left to right is kind of an evolutionary pattern, and then turning back around at the city or the essence, and then bringing it back through the gift, and then bringing the city and the gift back to what was previously shadow, now becoming much more of a kind of free, functional, embodied state. You get this really beautiful weave, you get a really beautiful circuit, and that would be involution, going city back to gift, back to now kind of the more physical expression.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the experience on the other side of moving in this way because for quite a few years in teaching and back I did a Venus sequence with a somatic relational therapist and it was really powerful. But during that time what we were finding is that coaching people to be able to experience the shadow frequencies and to learn the shadow frequencies, it doesn't work well if you do them from the shadow frequencies. And in fact, the best way, if you want to experience an embodiment of shadow frequencies, is to do it consciously from the gift space, being in enough personal empowerment that you can experience your agency and your sovereignty, and then invite the shadows up into that space instead of going down into them. And that was helpful. But what I find that this brings is it allows you to transform your own vessel, then gets to experience itself, bringing the city all the way down. And then that you realize that there's a bridge between the shadow and the gift, and that bridge is a really beautiful, intelligent space. There's a lot to offer, and so you can really see how like every shadow contains the gift. I would even go even further to say that there's a space between all of those dimensions where they're offering new layers of this invitation of the involution, like you were saying, of these acidic frequencies being able to come down. And I don't know, what was that, 12, 15 minutes or something like that? But you really get to have a felt sense of new frequencies in the body. The shadow was totally different in my experience from the first time to that sort of in between space. And I can now recognize that experience and I can know that gene key so much more deeply than if I'm only reading the material or only looking at the elements of what shows up in that behavior of the shadow or the behavior of the gift that shows up in life. It's a inward gaze, a yin gaze to understand these. And our bodies are oracles, they're tuning forks, and it's a really glorious gift to turn up the volume on your tuning fork. And I feel like that's actually what the world is inviting us into now. So thanks for that journey, Chris. It was lovely.
Oh, thank you. It was so, yeah, so marvelous. You attuned so naturally and easily. And so in the course, we'll be getting lots of time to practice and homework for ourselves to learn this form, and we'll have some variations, but that's kind of the sort of the foundational form that we'll be working with. And then also then how to be able, if that resonates for someone or variations of that basic idea, how to facilitate, how to support others to walk into their own sort of constellations in this way. And we worked there with that way of setting it up, but we could also work with lines, pathways, spheres, so that the whole map becomes itself a kind of a constellation and it becomes alive. And then it gets really playful and it can get really, really fun.
Yeah. We did the sphere of IQ without any gene key in it, without any keynotes in it. We just did the sphere of IQ the other day, just as like a test of like, what would this be like? And I was like, oh my gosh, I had this experience of being Venus. I was like such a, like not Venus, the archetype, but like the star, like the star planet, really. And so it was just like, you never really know what's going to show up. And it's such a fun journey of playing with the embodiment of the gene keys. And so, yeah, lots more to come in the lessons for that. Um, Please reach out if you have any questions or if you want to know more about it, because we would love to have a small group come together quite quickly. And the details can all be found in website at goldenguidance.online, or just reach out to Chris or myself. Thank you so much for this little
Mm.
mini masterclass, and I'm super excited to see who comes together to collaborate with us and supporting all of humanity in this embodiment experience. So thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everybody for listening and look forward to, yeah, more fun to come.
Bye for now.